we speak to two women in two very different parts of the country. One in a very blue state, and another in a more conservative one. But both women were pressured by their doctors to abort their children. You know, we always hear that abortion is between a woman and her doctor only. But what happens when the doctor violates their Hippocratic oath and insists abortion against the mother's will? Well, we're about to find out. Out of all the topics that we've covered in this podcast so far, I'm the most shocked to learn how prevalent this type of medical coercion is across our country. Today you'll hear from Chelsea Davis, a young blind mother in Florida, and Mary Cronquist, a mother who was living in New York at the time. Both women received very scary diagnoses about their babies in the womb from their doctors. And although both women have very different outcomes with their pregnancies, the common thread was they were both pushed toward abortion despite their wishes. From Exposed, Abortion in America, this is Under Pressure: What to Do When Your Doctor Demands You Abort.
My name is Chelsea Painter Davis, and I am from Lakeland, Florida.
Did you ever think that you'd be a target of abortion coercion?
No, absolutely not. So my husband and I have been married about 6 years, and then we had our daughter during the height of COVID. And then in 2021, we decided we wanted to have another baby. So I got pregnant, went in for all my appointments, and everything was going great. I was really thrilled. I was really excited. We'd done one of those at-home blood, gender reveal tests, and we found out that he was a boy. And we were really, really happy. We'd named him Dallas, and that was as early as 9 weeks that we already had a name for him.
So pregnancy is humming along with Dallas. Kind of share about that process, and then when did you hit that abrupt stop with your doctor when it was like, oh wow, this is different than how it was with my daughter?
Yes, I was always the high risk person in the mother-baby pregnancy scenario. So I have 2 blood clotting disorders. I have factor V Leiden and factor II prothrombin, and they're very serious blood clotting conditions. So during my first pregnancy with my daughter, I automatically had to see maternal fetal medicine as my only really option for obstetric care. And I was always used to all the questions being about me, about my health, about how I was doing. Everything with my daughter was perfect. She had nothing wrong with her. It was an easy delivery. It was fantastic. So I really took that sense of safety for granted as I went into the second pregnancy. I expected everything once again to be perfect, my child to be 100% healthy, everything to be happy and fine. And I remember going into my 12-week appointment just making jokes, smiling, being happy, just being myself. I didn't have a single care in the world. And it was then when we finally had a real dating ultrasound, checking him out at 12 weeks, that they noticed something was very, very wrong with him. And I was absolutely shocked because it had never even entered my mind as a possibility. I was focused on all the joys of the pregnancy. I hadn't been scared at all.
And you're, you don't have to tell me your age, but I mean, are you Gen Z or millennial?
I'm technically a millennial, but just barely. I was born in 1995, so I'm 29 years old.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you were pretty young. I mean, you were in your 20s with both of your kids.
Yes. I think I was 24 when my daughter was born and 26 with my son.
Okay, got it. So after they notice that there is something that looks different on the ultrasound with your son, what happens?
Well, to start off with, we were just in there for an ultrasound and then a normal clinic visit. So I didn't know anything was wrong until the sonographer came in the second time. She tried to play it off like it wasn't a big deal, but I knew, and I wasn't laughing anymore. My husband, he tried to tell me everything was okay. It's just, they just needed an extra picture or two. It didn't mean anything, but I think every mom has a sense in their gut that just tells them the truth in that moment. And I knew something was very, very wrong. So as soon as she was done with the second ultrasound, I asked her if I could wipe jelly off my belly. And she said, actually, no, she might have to come in a third time. And and I got really, really scared. Next in was the head maternal fetal medicine specialist, who I had not even been scheduled to see that day. He came in and tried to chit chat with me about, oh, how are you doing today? Having a nice day? And then pulled up the ultrasound and got right into it. He's like, so there is a mass in your son's abdomen. It's about a third of his body. And no one here knows what it is. I've never seen anything like this before on a baby of this gestation. It could be bowel entanglement, could be cancer, it could be a genetic disorder. It could mean that he's gonna miscarry soon. And it was like I couldn't breathe anymore. I was so shocked. I was used to being the one in danger in the pregnancy because I was so high risk, and now it was my baby. And I tried to cut in. I was like, okay, well, what are my treatment options? Like, let's make a plan. What are we gonna do? And he said, well, that depends. And I was like, depends on what? And he said, well, that depends on if you're going to continue with the pregnancy or if you're going to terminate. I don't do that. Fell out of my mouth so quickly. It felt like a muscle reflex, but it's like he didn't even notice. He just kind of said, uh-huh. And within 5 minutes, he offered me termination again. I was so confused. I was like, okay, I just answered you. I'm not going to have an abortion. I need to know what my options are. And he said, well, I mean, we want to figure out something quickly, so why don't we give you an amniocentesis at 16 weeks? It's not going to be as accurate as if we wait till 20 weeks, but I really want to get you these answers really quickly so you can make a decision. And I was in such shock. I didn't know what to do. I said, oh, okay, whatever test, because I wanted to know what was wrong with my baby. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know what we could do to fix it, what we could do to get him medication, surgery. I didn't know. I'm not the doctor. And so I just agreed to the amniocentesis, and he said, okay, all right, and left.
Did he explain to you that did he explain to you that the amnio was an invasive procedure?
They didn't explain that there was risk associated with the procedure. But it wasn't until later that I was talking to other doctors that I was even told that there's risks associated with that procedure. Not just risk of miscarriage, but also to my health, because I was on anticoagulants. I would have to suspend them to even have that procedure. And it seemed like he was just so sure I needed this test. None of those risks really mattered in the way he was presenting it.
And had you at any point with any doctor really had them speculate like that? I mean, it sounded like he was just running off a list of lots of things, but it was all speculation.
It was 100% speculation. I mean, nothing like that had happened with my daughter, and I'd never felt that way in a doctor's appointment before. I always felt like when they gave me a diagnosis, they were sure about it. But the way he was talking to me, it felt like he was just saying anything. And as my appointments continued at that clinic, the diagnoses got worse. I mean, at first it was just miscarriage, bowel entanglement, maybe Down syndrome. But by the last appointment, he was talking about brain damage and stillbirth and cancer. It was almost as if he thought if he made the diagnosis worse, I would get the abortion.
Wow. So talk to me then about the amnio. Did you go forward with that procedure?
So I had spoken with family friends who had another family member who was a doctor, and she kind of told me that I didn't have to have that procedure. I needed to think about it more. I needed to consider the risks. And as soon as I realized that there was a miscarriage risk, I called the clinic and asked, is this going to change what you do to save my son? And the nurse who had been put in charge of briefing me about the amnio said she wasn't ready to talk to me about that, so she'd have the doctor call me. And so I waited, and then when I was at home, I got called by that same maternal fetal medicine specialist from the first appointment. And he was explaining to me why he thought I should have the amnio. And I asked my same question, well, is it going to change the treatment plan? And he said, well, yes. If your son has something like trisomy 13, those babies don't live that long anyway. So we would never do something like an emergency C-section for him.
He told you that on the phone?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
I was shocked. Because I thought I was talking to someone who wanted to save my baby.
Right.
And it was that moment that I realized that was not his priority. His priority was to figure out if I was going to have an abortion or not. So I told him on the phone again, well, I'm not going to have an abortion. That's not an option here. So really, you're telling me the amniocentesis is not going to give me any information that's helpful. And he said, well, with a big sigh, I guess if you can promise me you're not going to have an abortion, then I guess it's not necessary to do the amnio. But why don't we just keep you scheduled anyway? And I told him, well, I'm not going to have it, but okay. And I came to that next appointment, and the first thing nursing staff asked me is, they're like, did you hold your medication for your amnio today? I was like, no, I told you I'm not having it. Like, how many times do I have to say this?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until they knew they couldn't perform the procedure, because I had taken my anticoagulants before the appointment, that they finally dropped it. And I went into another appointment. And at this point, after the horrific phone call, I had made a complaint at the hospital. And I thought that meant that I wouldn't have to have this conversation again. I thought I'd made myself very clear with the doctor that I didn't want to talk about abortion. I'd made my decision. He didn't need to talk about it again. It had already happened twice. We were done. But lo and behold, that next appointment at 16 weeks, he was the doctor who came into the room. And for context, there are many maternal fetal medicine specialists in that clinic. It could have been anyone. The one you get is random when you're at that level of a clinic. But somehow it was always him. And the first thing he said to me when he came into that clinic room was, after me filing the complaint, was, well, I guess I'll get right into it, because it's been made very clear to me that you don't appreciate chit chat. And then he continued to tell me that they still had no clue what was wrong with my son. And that's when he escalated the diagnoses into cancer and brain damage, stillbirth. And my husband stepped in that time, and he said, okay, well, we're not going to have an abortion, because he felt the need to offer it again in that appointment. And the doctor was like, okay, I gotcha. Yet 5 minutes later, when the appointment was over, he felt the need to throw over his shoulder, if that test for brain damage comes back positive, you can still change your mind. And that's when I really lost it, just emotionally. Because at that point, it's like, how many times do I have to tell you? You're not listening to me. How many times do I have to tell his hospital? He's not listening to me. And you're not even, if you're so fixated on asking me if I want an abortion, how fixated are you going to be on giving my son the care he needs?
Yeah.
You've already told me if he's too sick, you're not going to save his life with a C-section. What else are you not going to do?
I think that's a really important point. If we could just kind of explore that a little bit more. Can you describe, for those who haven't been in this situation, what that power imbalance is? Because this individual and this medical care team, they are the ones that hold your son and your pregnancy, you know, your care in their hands in the future, like the over the span of that pregnancy, your safety and your son's safety in their hands. So that is an extreme power imbalance there.
It absolutely was, because what I heard was, if your son's sick enough, I'm just going to let him die. And that's when I started investigating other options with my insurance, but I was on state insurance at the time. There was only so many places I could go because of my medical condition with the blood clotting disorders. So I already only had about 3 or 4 options in the entire state. With my son needing a level 2 ultrasound so we could see that mass in his abdomen and know exactly what was going on, now we're down to 1 place in the state. So now I had to try to figure out how I was going to get my state insurance to cover a doctor in Texas. I didn't even know if that was possible. And all because the one doctor I was trying to see, I didn't feel like he even cared if my baby lived or not.
Chelsea, let's go into that a little bit, because, you know, I don't have any proof that you were targeted in this way, but we have heard from other people. There seems to be a continuation of of certain people that pressure people to abort based on life standing, different conditions that women have. Can you just describe some of those things that could potentially have made you a little bit more susceptible to that abortion coercion?
Yes, I think that I looked like the kind of woman who would see him helping me with an abortion as a favor. I think that's what he thought in his head, because I was on Medicaid, state insurance. I didn't have a lot of money, so I was wearing clothes that had been bought at the same store that I bought milk at. And I had a very serious risks in my pregnancy because of my blood clotting disorders. And I'm also disabled. I'm a blind woman. And I think he just looked at all those factors in me and just assumed he knew not only what I wanted, but what was best for me. And I think that when I pushed back so hard, he was shocked, because how could a disabled woman on a low income with health risks of her own, who already has a toddler to take care of, how could she ever handle a disabled baby? Why would she want to? Mm-hmm. I think that's what he thought about me. And that is not at all who I am. I never saw myself by those characteristics. I think that's a big disconnect between me and him, is he looked at those external markers and decided who I was on the inside, and it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really valid point, and I know that we don't have this man here to ask him that, but I will say that I've been talking to women across the country, and this is something that comes up quite frequently. This type of targeting, profiling, and then an eventual suggestion of abortion or push for abortion. So one other thing that I think is really important that we punctuate here is this pressure was not isolated to his domain. I mean, he was reaching you in your own sanctuary, in your home.
Yes. That, I think, was the most inappropriate thing that he did. I understand that in his mind, he was having a follow-up phone call with a patient about his plan of care. But in my mind, I was in a life-affirming home. That's the space I take care of my children. That is not the space where you get to call me and ask me if I want them to die.
Where did you go from there?
After that third interaction with him, I was really devastated, and I just didn't know what to do. I kind of gave up, because at that point I'd already made a complaint to the hospital. I didn't feel like they were going to try to save him, because he made that pretty clear with the trisomy 13 comment. I had no idea what to do. I couldn't go anywhere else with my insurance. I was really trapped. With that doctor. And one morning I just woke up, and I don't know what changed in my mind, but I said, I am done. I am not going to be bullied anymore. He's getting bullied now. This is over. And I called a pregnancy resource center, the closest one to me, and the first words out of my mouth were, when is it illegal to get an abortion? Because somewhere in my mind, I thought that once it was illegal, I would be protected from the harassment. Because it had been every interaction. Now I was over 16 weeks, and I knew the cutoff was coming soon. I was like, maybe once he can't do the abortion anymore, he'll stop. Because I had already guessed correctly that they were doing abortions in that hospital. And I knew that there's financial incentive with selling an abortion. They don't do them for free. And I thought maybe that's what'll change. So I got on the phone with the Pregnancy Resource Center, and I think I shocked them. That's not typically the first thing that a client says on the phone, and they were scared. I was trying to get one fast enough, and so I had to say, no, I don't want an abortion. I need help to get my doctor to stop harassing me. And I thought maybe when it was illegal, he'd legally have to shut up and leave me alone. And I don't know what else to do. And I'm so upset. And they immediately put me on with the nurse. She immediately gave me like what rights I had, what I could do. She explained to me, she's like, I don't care who he is at that hospital. You are going to call every single person there, and you're going to escalate this until he shuts his mouth and never speaks to you like this again, because you are the patient and you deserve respect. And you've told him no, and your baby is not trash, and he's not going to treat you like this anymore. And it really gave me the courage to start making more phone calls at the hospital, to call my primary care provider and begging, saying, please, can you send me a referral anywhere? I can't see this man again. I can't take it. It's so hurtful, because when he is talking about my son and saying, well, your son's likely going to be disabled, you probably don't want him then. That kind of implications. It's not only calling into question my value as a disabled person, him regarding my son as worthless because he might have been disabled. He's calling into question my love as a mother. And it's still to this day the worst thing, the most hurtful thing anyone's ever said to me. Because the way that I love my children has nothing to do with the abilities that they have, the abilities that they don't have. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what grades they're going to get in school. And the fact that he said in front of my son, because we were getting into the point where my son could hear what was going on outside of my belly. The first things that my son ever heard was a doctor saying, implying that I wouldn't love him if he was messed up. And it just was the most hurtful thing that's ever been said to me. But the Pregnancy Resource Center really, really helped me have the courage to keep fighting. And I finally gave enough pushback at that hospital and made enough noise that I was promised he would never speak to me again. And when one of the team members came in to tell me make that promise to me, I really tried to be fair to the doctor. I said, I think he just doesn't understand. I don't know why, but I think he just doesn't understand. And she confirmed, she said, yes, when I told him you didn't want to see him again, he was shocked. And I don't know how that can happen to a person, how you can be surprised that a woman would be angry when you pressure her into an abortion she doesn't want. But that was the kind of callousness that had happened to that doctor, where he wasn't even fully aware that what he was doing was wrong.
And it also makes me think that this is his MO, right? I mean, you obviously weren't the first person that he's had this conversation with, if he could have it so carelessly and so confidently. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, were you concerned? I mean, I would have been concerned about the labor, like these people in this office. Now I'm worried, are they going to give me all of their best when they deliver my child?
I was absolutely terrified.
So Chelsea, what ended up happening? I mean, what happened with your son and the delivery, and how is he now?
By the time he was born was a tiny cluster of liver calcifications that did absolutely nothing to him. He was born perfectly healthy, normal heart rate, normal breathing. We went to see a pediatrician. We had a consult with a pediatric surgeon, and they were nothing. I remember telling the pediatric surgeon, I was like, yes, they've been seeing this on his ultrasound since he was 12 weeks gestation. And the pediatric surgeon was shocked. She's like, oh, wow, I bet they put you through it. I'm like, you have no idea what I've been through during this pregnancy. And all for him to be fine. It was about a month before his first birthday, and he had his last ultrasound. And the ultrasound tech, not knowing anything about it because we'd moved states by then, said, quote, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be taking a picture of in this liver. There's nothing in here. And I just broke down. My new medical team, having no idea why I was crying, because they were just reporting on a healthy baby. They didn't understand the level of relief that I felt. when we knew not only was he going to be healthy, not only was he going to have a safe life, not only was he going to be here with us, but there was not a thing wrong in his body.
You know, Chelsea, not that I ever want you to talk to this doctor again, but if you could talk to him very directly now and he would actually listen with an open mind, what would you want him to know about your son, Dallas?
You know, I really wrestle with that a lot because there's part of me that thinks he doesn't deserve to know anything about my son. He doesn't have the right to get to see how beautiful my son is, to know how wonderful he is. He doesn't deserve that. But then there's the Christian part of me that thinks maybe this would have changed his mind. Maybe I should say something. But I don't know what else I could say, because I'd spent more than one appointment trying to convince him that my son was wanted, and it didn't do it. So I don't know if there's anything I could say to him that would make him see how valuable my child was and how valuable all life is. And then just from the disability perspective, like, even if my son hadn't been fine, I'm not fine. I can't see, but that doesn't mean that my life is not worth living. And I don't know how or even to begin to convey that to someone who is so calloused, who is so closed off to this hope and to this truth.
But it's got to concern you that your story and your situation is not isolated to you and isolated to your son, that this is happening across the country. And there are support groups for this, and we're talking to people who have experienced this pressure from doctors, from medical staff. What's your advice to these moms and dads that are experiencing this trauma right now, that are going through this and are terrified and don't have the medical acumen or don't understand? I mean, what would you say to them since you've been through this before?
The first thing that you need to do is you need to figure out who is going to be on your side. There are people that I went to in this situation explaining what was happening with my son, thinking they would be shocked. And they actually said things to me like, well, maybe you should think about what the doctor said. And I was horrified. That made it even harder, because the people I thought were going to be there for me, they weren't always. And so what I learned is that the place that's always going to be there for you is the Pregnancy Resource Center. They are completely designed to be on your side, to fight for you, to give you your actual options, to equip you with resources and knowledge and information. They are in the fight for you. They're just waiting for you to call. And I wish I'd done that the first day. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that I was exactly who should be calling them. I've been a big pro-lifer since I was 12 years old, and I knew about pregnancy resource centers. But for some reason, I always thought that they were for other women. They were for the teenage pregnancy, or for the woman who is pregnant from sexual assault. They were those kind of situations. I thought that because I was married, I was pro-life, I was a mom, I went to church every Sunday, I thought that they didn't apply to me. And I realize now how incredibly arrogant that was. I'm honestly ashamed that I used to think that. Because these pregnancy resource centers are not for a certain kind of woman. They're for every woman. So if you are dealing with a situation like this, you need to call them for help. Because even if they don't know exactly what condition your baby might have, they might not have a nurse on staff who's equipped in that situation. They can connect you with people that are. They can get you the help. They can get you the emotional support. They could be there for you. And I wish I would have started with that on day one.
Yeah. And there are women out here listening to this, and I imagine they're pro-life, and they're thinking that this could never happen to me. What is your caution to them?
This can happen to anyone. We're not guaranteed our health. We're not guaranteed that we will always be able-bodied, and that is true for our children as well. And there is always, unfortunately, a situation where people can decide to try to hurt you. It can be doctors, it can be family members, anyone can decide to try to coerce you into an abortion. And so you really have to be prepared before. I spent so many years researching pro-life stuff, being the weird kid that had this strange interest that no one else in high school cared about. And I realize now that God was preparing me for this one moment he knew I would have 14 years later. Because when the doctor came in and made all these suggestions, I couldn't be lied to. I already knew everything he was talking about. He said termination, but it's not what I heard. I knew exactly what abortion procedure he would have to do at my gestation. I knew exactly how it worked. I knew exactly how horrific it was. So I couldn't be lied to. You as the mom, you're the patient. You're the only one who can stand up for you, who can stop this, can say no more. And so you have to be ready.
Hello, this is Mary.
Hi, Mary. This is Emily with SBA. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you so much.
And Mary, you're about to share your very important story with us about your son, Stephen. But had you had children before? Did you have previous pregnancies where you could kind of compare the experiences?
Oh, yes. I had 4 sons already, and this was our 5th son.
Okay, got it. So you already knew what the process of pregnancy was like and going through all of that and the different medical procedures, ultrasounds, all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so with your son, Stephen, your first trimester, and you go in for your first ultrasound, and the doctor tells you that something doesn't look exactly right. Can you just explain what happened there?
Yes. So I went in for the just pregnancy confirmation ultrasound. So that would have been, I guess, somewhere around 8-9 weeks. And the ultrasound she had in her office, and she was my OBGYN for previous children. So I knew her very well. And her ultrasound machine was very clear, high definition. And even I could see there was something wrong with the way the baby's head and skull were developing, or at least shaping. So I could tell. And you also, when you have enough ultrasounds, you can kind of read the tech's face, even though you know that they can't say anything, you know that, okay, this is something they're going to go get the doctor for. Mm-hmm. And so that's, at that first ultrasound is when she left, she got the doctor. Again, it was a doctor I trusted very, very much. She actually saved my 4th son's life by delivering early under an emergency. And so I really trusted her. And she said, it looks very much like your baby has anencephaly. Dr. Lambers told me that it looked like the baby had anencephaly, and that was a terminal diagnosis. He would be perfectly fine, safe, comfortable, as long as he was in me. As long as he was in the womb, he would be fine. But it was very likely that his brain wouldn't develop enough to keep his body alive after birth. So it all depended on how much his brain developed. If he had developed any skull to protect his brain, it was probably not going to develop correctly. So very low risk of surviving long after birth, but high risk of surviving perfectly fine during the pregnancy. I mean, more than likely surviving just fine during the pregnancy.
Okay. And then the doctor then referred you to a specialist or a specialist organization?
There was maternal fetal medicine, that kind of specialty.
Okay, got it. All right. And so then what happened once you got there?
They would do an ultrasound, and this was the typical appointment. They'd do an ultrasound. They'd find out, yes, he still has anencephaly. And then the doctor would come in and say, we suggest you terminate. We recommend an abortion. And then one of them used the phrase, you have no choice. And that was when I was getting further along. And maybe she felt the quote unquote pressure of me being further along in the gestation. I don't know. But this was pretty much every appointment. And I don't really remember which one said what, but I do remember every one of them said termination, abortion, why go through it? You have no choice. And every time I had to push back and say, yes, I do.
What did they say when you said, yes, I do have a choice?
The last one was the one I remember the most. And that's because she had said, why would you put yourself through that? So I had to go even into, human grief and human suffering and human care. And, moms protect their children, and if your son was given 6 months to live, you wouldn't give them a lethal dose of morphine tomorrow. Walk out, slam the door.
The doctor slammed the door on you?
Yeah, she did. I remember distinctly. The one that I pushed back the most on, because at that point, by her, I think it was probably the third doctor in that maternal fetal medicine group. So not counting my very good doctor, but the other group, I think it was the third one. So by then I was probably somewhere around 6-7 months.
Oh my gosh. 6-7 months.
They just kept saying it, even though it was obvious. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, didn't they read? I didn't ask them about this, but I'm thinking, didn't they read the notes from the last 3 appointments? Didn't they see I was already told that this was what they recommended and I already said no? I mean, you would think that by this point I've had plenty of time to consider it. I'm not going to do it. So just good patient care would be supporting my choice, supporting the fact that I'm carrying the baby, help me bring him to term, help me deliver him safely, help me to kiss him and say goodbye. If that's what is to happen naturally. And so it really was shocking to me that they kept saying it, even after it was very clear in the earlier appointments that I had said no already.
It's really striking to me that a couple of different points, but really striking to me that they could look at you straight faced and say, A, you have no choice, and B, you have no choice with a late term abortion. Well,
this was in New York, and the only reason she gave me, and I'm talking about the last one, that third one. The others weren't I have to say, they weren't as bad, quote unquote, as that last one. I can picture her face. I don't remember her name, but I can picture her face. I could picture how she's looking at me. And in the back of my mind, I thought, I don't understand why I'm making her angry. Why is she angry at me? That was the most baffling and not heartbreaking, but just like, that's not what I need right now. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good patient care would indicate that you respect your patient. There was no respect in her face for me at all.
Right. It's really sad. I mean, it's just really sad to hear you say that and then think about everyone else who isn't sharing their story that has been through this. Mm-hmm. Okay. So 3 doctors from that organization are pushing you to abortion, if not expressly saying you have no choice. One walks out slamming the door, belittling you in that situation and in your son's life. What now? Like, what happens next?
Well, the fourth one, the fourth doctor, who was another godsend.
And is this at the same practice?
Same practice, yes.
Okay.
She came in and the ultrasound still showed, yes, he's still anencephalic. He has developed some brainstem. So when he's born, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen. We don't know whether his body will be able to breathe on its own. We're not sure, but but that ultrasound did indicate, yes, he's still anencephalic. And this doctor came in, and her demeanor was different. And she was holding the chart. And I remember her looking at me and saying, "You don't want an abortion, do you?" And my husband and I both just took a big, deep sigh, and I started crying. I was bawling. And I said, "Oh my gosh, please don't make me go back to those other people. I just don't think I can deal with that." And she said, "That's okay. You don't have to. I'll be with you. And we'll walk this together and everything is going to be okay." So that was such a blessing. And so she did all of the rest of the appointments. So I didn't have to go through the rest of the
see those other people again. And that was kind of her pulling the strings for me, as opposed to see other people, because you never know. But she was like, she just was very confident that she could manage the birth. And, she really did care about helping us see Stephen, and helping the delivery go well. And so she was really very respectful of our wishes and our desires. And the rest of the pregnancy was like that. She encouraged us, and we were doing it already, but she encouraged us just appreciate every kick and do all the things you would do them now. The all of the lullabies you typically sing, all of that. And always hope, and always, just hope that he's going to be okay when he's born. And there are, if his brain develops, but his skull doesn't, there are ways of handling that. And so there are interventions we can do for that. So we can just see how this works. But if nature takes its course, I'll be right there with you. Takes its course, as we suspect it will. She'll be there. And so when it came time to deliver him, it was just like that. And she was able, she kind of assured us that we wouldn't deal with any pressure in the delivery room or afterward. She said, I can make sure that people who respect your choice are in that room, and you won't feel pressured or looked down on or anything. We'll be there for you, basically. So she was, and all the nurses were fantastic. Very, very helpful. And Stephen was born very, very, just peacefully and like a normal, natural birth, just, and my family was there. That was a little bit not normal. They were all outside the room. They all came in as soon as he was born. And, they all were surrounding him while he was baptized, and we had 9 minutes with him.
Mary, I heard you say, before I've talked to you today, I heard you say that in regards to your son, Stephen, that true love comes with difficult times, and that you should spend every minute that you can. And you have to reject fear.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's Mama Bear, right? Like that's what mamas do. So being able to lean into that and saying, no, I'm not going to give in to this fear. And I'm going to do the right thing for my children.
Mm-hmm. And what else, what were you able to do with your son, Stephen, that you wouldn't have been had there been, an abortion at any point?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we were able to say goodbye, hold him, kiss him, and at no point do we doubt what we chose. There's no doubt because we fought for every single minute. So we did everything we could. Like I was saying before, with that ER doctor comes out to tell the family, we did everything we could because it's important for us. It's important for us to know we loved and respected his life, no matter how long it was. And I have no doubt that we did the right thing, and that Stephen had no pain and he had no fear. And he was surrounded by love the whole time. So I think that was the biggest thing. And then we were able to bury him like humans, all humans have for time immemorial had burial practices. It's because it's important for the living, for our emotional well-being, for the way that we interact with those who have gone before us. That's all important. So I was able to have a burial site. He is there. We can visit him. His brothers and sisters who came after him know that they have a brother who was buried, who is praying for them, or who touched our hearts and lived close to us, and who we loved. And they have pictures of the blanket that I'd cover my belly on or with when I was pregnant with him, and they have a stuffed animal that the nurses gave him in the hospital. So all of those things we were able to have. But if there's a woman who is not quite sure, maybe she's never had kids before, maybe she has, maybe she's scared, maybe she's alone, maybe she's never really considered whether she is pro-life or not. But either way, under any no matter where you are on that spectrum, understand that with an abortion, you will always be questioning what if, and you won't have that peaceful rest that you can live with the rest of your life. I have peace now. I think, and I remember with comfort, not fear, not anger, I have peace. Yeah.
That's a really
that's
good.
the biggest thing that I would not have had otherwise.
Mm. And, oftentimes, we've seen a lot of stories from the mainstream media, corporate media on this, where in the story they show a couple who gets a difficult diagnosis. And then I read that the couple says, we were told that the abortion was the compassionate choice for our child. That was a wanted child. But they were told it was more compassionate to have the abortion procedure committed on the kid than to give birth. Can you explain? Because I think that when I hear a couple repeat that talking point from a doctor, that to me screams that the doctor is not giving them informed consent as to what the procedure is inflicting on the body of that child during the process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I agree exactly with what you just said. And I had the benefit of that first doctor saying he will not be in pain. They're going to tell you that abortion is what you need to do. And she didn't say they would use the word compassion, but she prepared us with that idea. She said, he is not in pain. He is comfortable and safe with you. And I think she was preparing me for that talking point or that pressure from a doctor saying it's compassionate. But medicine, first of all, not telling them about the procedure and the pain that inflicts in itself. But then also, medicine is, again, if you have someone who has a terminal diagnosis, you don't take their life now. That's not how good medicine is. Good medicine helps provide comfort, while their natural life lives out. And heroic medicine provides comfort while their natural life works out, however it is. And then at the same time, maybe in another field, is fighting like crazy to find a cure for whatever that was. So I would love it rather than, I would think good medicine would be, let's find what causes anencephaly. Let's stop it from happening. Maybe it's a deficiency of some type. Maybe it's genetic. I don't know. But at no time could anybody tell me why this was happening to Stephen. And in most cases, I just wonder whether they even care. Do they care to find cures for these things? Or they just say, kind of like a eugenics mentality, no, we'll just terminate these children first, and then we don't have to worry about the cure. And that, again, is just so antithetical to what good medicine, I think, should be.
And I'm concerned about that because if you de facto are pushed to abortion as the quote unquote solution, and if you stop searching for the cure, then are you really going to find it at a pace that we could have found it? I think about, I hearken back to things like cleft palate, how that used to be a death sentence for kids, spina bifida, but people persisted to find solutions instead of just saying, no, this is the perfect candidate for abortion.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I remember thinking about that, about the distinction between good and bad medicine, and seeing that this isn't heroic. This isn't, you want to be able to look up to your doctors, right? You want to be able to revere them. You think they've worked so hard, and usually you think they're really smart, and you want to be able to look up to them. But this just makes them seem something less than honorable. They're not performing their duty correctly. They're not really living up to that Hippocratic oath at all.
Right, and I wonder also if it's something with a job where the doctors are undoubtedly looking at the patient clinically versus not personally, as a mom would their child.
Yeah, holistically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure.
And that concerns me too. So that informed consent is a piece that I think is heavily missing in these conversations with these parents that I have seen interviewed, on some of these, corporate media stories that are shilling for abortion, which is, look at this very tragic and sad case. And then painting the abortion procedure, that dismemberment procedure in the womb as somehow the compassionate option versus holding your child, burying your child, and the like. You say this perfectly, but not to say that there's not grief in the process, just that you were able to work through it.
Right.
Because you had the answers.
Right. And I had the support, and we had Christian burial, and we had that time, and the connection. And I think that connection is also another huge part, like letting yourself spend extra time rocking with the baby when you're pregnant, and singing extra songs, and having the brothers, or, he had older brothers, come over and speak and talk to the baby. And so having that time and those memories are also very important. I think that would be something that you would lose if you just said, no, I'm going to end his life now.
Well, I'm really concerned because I have been hearing more and more stories like this nationwide. And I know that there are people out there going through this. I never thought that I would have to go through it. And I was confronted with it on a minimal scale just recently with my pregnancy. So what are some tips for being courageous against doctors who are trying to assert their will to abort on your family and child? What would you advise a mom or a couple who are finding themselves faced with this, scary ultrasound or pregnancy result?
I think I would, if a doctor is pressuring, I think I would make sure you have your voice. You use the voice you have. We as a culture have to empower women to be feminine. If they are pregnant, they are mothers. So be that mother and stand up against the pressure, and ask questions. And if you can, I would say find another doctor. If it's possible, just find another doctor. Tap into your maternal instinct. Let it lead you to stand up and say, no, not for me. I'm going to spend every last minute I can with this child for however long, just as I would after he or she was born. I would spend every minute. If something happened, if he broke his neck when he was 5 on the playground, I would be there every minute. I would fight for every heartbeat. So allow your maternal instincts to kick in and push against a doctor who is obviously not. If a doctor's pressuring you to abort, they are not respecting your instincts or your femininity or your motherhood or your child. My story is not singular. And I do know that if I didn't have the support and the preparation and the love and the care of others, that I just don't know if I could have gone through it. And so that's, I guess there is one other thing, is that if you have loved ones who might be suffering from this, who might have just gotten a bad diagnosis, absolutely tell them that they do have a choice, that they can they can care for their child, and that there are support groups out there now. And there are people who are willing to help them. And then you tell them you will help them, tell them you will be there to help them. You will walk with them through it. So if you have a loved one who gets a terminal diagnosis in utero, just stand next to them, put your arm around them and say you'll stay with them throughout the whole process.
Thanks for listening to the latest accounts from women across the country that have faced medical pressure to abort. Join us through this entire series to hear more accounts in depth. And join us for our next episode as we speak to women from minority communities who boldly call out the abortion industry's targeting of their community. Through these conversations, we'll hear from them about the hyperfixation from media and politicians for particular people groups that quote-unquote need abortion more due to their race, culture, or economic status. From Exposed, Abortion in America, this is Under Pressure.